Hi, my name is Stuart Lynch. Welcome back. In this video, we're exploring all the freshly polished UI control updates in iOS 26's Liquid Glass design. That includes toggles, segmented controls, sliders with tick marks, menus and submenus, and I'm going to show you a slick Add to List button with matched geometry transitions. If you're building your apps in SwiftUI, stick around. You won't want to miss this one. In the previous video in this series on the new Liquid Glass design paradigm in OS 26, I covered how the button controls were changed. In this video, I'm going to take a look at some of the other controls that had design changes as well. By the end of this video, you'll learn all about a number of different views that have taken on this new glass effect. There are toggles, segmented controls, and sliders. And with sliders, you can now reveal tick marks. I'll also show you how menus appear now in SwiftUI. And that includes submenus. And then finally, I'm going to show you how you can implement a really nice add button to add to a list. But this is best shown on a device, so you'll have to wait for that. I do have a starter project for this video, and I encourage you to download it from the link in the description. There are two branches, but if you want to work along with me, download the starter project branch. You can either clone the repository or download the zipped archive. I do recommend that you do work along with me, but if you'd prefer, you can also download the completed source code from the completed branch. That's up to you. I will be creating a full video on changes to the tab view in OS 26, and in particular the iPad later in this series. But for now, I want to refactor this Start tab view to be a tab view that will allow me to display any one of these pages that I'm working on if I want to view them in the simulator or on a device. So there are 3 pages, so we'll want 3 tabs. One for the Other Control page, and one for the Menus view, and one for the People's List page, which is a demo of things that we have learned so far in both of these videos. So let's start by replacing this text view with a tab view. And the simplest way to create a tab view is to use a label as the tab, and that is by specifying a string and a system image. Like Other Controls for the string, and for the system image, we'll just use one dot circle. And the view that's going to be displayed in this tab is going to be the Other Controls view. And right away you can see that the tab looks different from the previous version of iOS. So let me copy this tab and create 2 more. For the second tab, I'm going to use the string menus for the title, and the system image will be 2 dot circle. The view to be displayed is going to be the menus view. And for the third tab, the string will be demo with the system image of 3 dot circle. And this view will be the people list view. And you can see as I tap the tabs, the corresponding views come into view. As I reach the second tab, you can see that the tab bar is now frosted liquid glass. But for some reason, the navigation bar title is too close to the image, so I'll fix that shortly. But you can also move between tabs by holding and dragging your finger across the tabs, and you get to see a glass bubble move over the tabs. So let's fix the title, particularly for that second menu. By default, this navigation stack here is using a navigation bar title display mode of large. If I went to an inline mode, it would really diminish the size of this title and raise it up to the top. Well, in iOS 17, we are introduced to a new toolbar title display mode, but not many people really know about this. And for this, you have 2 different options here. You can have either both inline, which acts as the navigation title bar display mode, but you can also use an inline large. And with inline large, you get the large text aligned on the leading edge, and that's what I want for all of my tabs. So I'm just going to copy and paste that now on the remaining 2 tabs. Back in the Start tab now, I can see that they are all looking good. And you'll learn more about a possible limitation to this toolbar title display mode in the next video in this series. If you're enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment. And make sure you subscribe to my channel and enable notifications. You can also subscribe to my weekly newsletter. I'll leave a link in the description. The newsletter will provide you with more information about my latest videos along with what's coming up, plus some extra bonus material. Now, if you enjoy my content and want to support my work, you can buy me a coffee. If you really enjoy it, you can become a monthly subscriber and receive early access to all of my videos before they're released on YouTube. So first, let's take a look at the other controls. And the first one I want to look at is the toggle. Now, a toggle requires a Boolean variable to bind it to. So I'm going to start with a state variable that I'll call toggle on, and I'm going to initialize it as false. In my form then, I can create a toggle using the simplest initializer. So let's use the one where we specify a title key as a string, and we'll bind isOn to our toggle on state variable. At first glance, it looks as if nothing has changed. However, like the tab views, we can tap and hold and then drag, and we get to see that glass bubble as we toggle between true and false for that toggle on button. Next, within this labeled content closure for our form, I want to create a segmented picker. So let me start by creating an enum that I'm going to call mode, and it's going to be a string, but also case iterable. And the two cases will simply be light and dark, so like light mode and dark mode. Now I'll need a binding for the segmented control, so I'm going to create a state variable called selected mode, and I'll initialize it as the light mode case. Now, to create the segmented control, this is a special type of picker. So we'll start with the picker using the title selection content initializer. And for the title, I can use the string segmented control, which on an iPhone is not going to be displayed, but it's very useful for adaptive technology, so don't leave it out. The binding will be to the selected mode. And for the content, we can build that from our case iterable mode enum. So we can use a for each on the modes all cases, specifying the ID as self, and that's going to give us an iterator value that we can call mode. That's one of those cases. And then we can create a text view then to display the raw value of that case. This is not yet a segmented control yet though. We need to specify that the picker style is segmented. Now, like the toggle, at first glance, it doesn't look much different from before. But like the tab view and the toggle, we can tap and slide to reveal the glass bubble. Let's take a look at sliders now and new slider ticks. A slider has to be bound to some double value. So I'm going to use the same one for all three of our cases here that we're going to create. I'm going to create a state variable that I'll call slider value and initialize it as 0. But since I want it as a double, I'll have to use 0.0. Otherwise, the compiler would infer that it was an int. For the first slider, I'm going to create a slider using a slider value in step initializer. So the value is going to be bound to the slider value. We want it to be in a closed range that will be from 0 through 10. And the step will be 1. Again, it looks the same as before, but you guessed it. You can tap and hold to see the glass bubble so that you get to see what's behind the slider for more concise control. So let's enclose this in a VStack. And then below the slider in the VStack, let's create a text view to display the slider value, which is a double. But since it's always going to be an integer, since we're stepping by 1, I can use a format for the slider value and specify that it is a number with a precision set at a fraction length of 0. Now, according to the documentation, we actually should be seeing tick marks because I've used the step initializer, but they're not here. So perhaps there might be a bug in the beta. So what I want to do is take a look at what a tick is and how we can create them manually. So in the next labeled content container, let's create another slider bound to the same slider value. But I'm going to add another argument to the value in the initializer. And that is going to be a view builder containing slider tick content. The value and in arguments are exactly the same. We'll need a label here though, which again won't be displayed, but again, don't forget to use that because adaptive readers will be able to identify it. In the ticks closure, we can specify any number of slider ticks and specify a value where you want the tick to go. And that can be any one of the values in our integer range. So let's specify 0, 5, and 10. Now you can see tick marks below the slider right at those locations. And as you slide over them with a slider, you can see your placement. The slider will also now only snap to those ticks if you have them. So there is no way you can stop anywhere in between 0, 5, or 5 and 10. You can only select 0, 5, or 10. So let's embed this then in a VStack and add our slider value text below it. For the final slider, I want to create ticks for all integers from 0 through 10, but I want to use a loop for this. So let me start with the previous slider, but just remove the tick content. We can't just start with a for each loop here. We'll need to use a new slider tick content for each loop, providing a range of int to generate the slider tick content. So the data has to be a range of integers. So I can construct that by using a stride from 0 through 10 by 1, and then map the iterator to get that range of int. Now that range has to be identifiable, so we can specify the ID is the self key path. And then that's going to give us the value as an iterator. And it's that value that I can use to create our slider tick. Now all 10 are displayed, but you can only stop the slider on a tick. I realized as I was creating this view that I've never actually created a video on menus, so look for that in the coming months. In the meantime, for this view and this video, I'm going to create a menu with just some of the options that you can use as menu items. I've created a Z-stack here with a background just to give you an idea of what a menu with liquid glass will look like over top of an image. And that just happens to be one of my own photos. So I'm going to create a menu using the title resource, which is a localized string, and a content initializer. So for the title, I'll just use menu. And the content, which are menu items, are typically buttons, like this with a label as a string and an action. The menu on the view looks just like a normal button, but when you tap on it, the menu slides up over the button to present a frosted glass background. In previous versions of iOS, you could still see the button and the menu was above it, like you're seeing here. So let's create a second button using a label for the label. So the second item is going to be a string, and the system image is a to.circle. You can see here now that the images used in the label are now on the leading edge of the button. The first item is at the bottom of the view and the second one above it. And for reference here, you can see here in the iOS 18 version, the system image is on the trailing edge rather than the leading edge. Well, you can also add menu items as buttons with roles. So let's create one for delete using the system image trash. But I'm going to specify a role of destructive. And when the menu is selected, you can see that this menu item is at the top and it's using the destructive role color of red. Well, menus can also have submenus. So I'm going to create one using the content label initializer. And for the content, I'm just going to create two simple buttons using the strings sub1 and sub2. That's it. Nothing fancy here. For the label, I'm going to use a label itself and have submenu as the string, and then use a system image of filename.and.cursor arrow for the label's image. Right now, though, when I tap on this menu button, in this beta, in the preview, the menu turns black. If I dismiss and try again, it's not black anymore. But if I tap on the submenu, it's black. Well, fortunately, this is a bug in previews and simulators only, and I have reported this as a feedback. I do have beta for iOS 26 installed on my test iPhone 11 here, though, so let me run it here. And I'm going to bring it into view, and I'm using Bezel. It's an app that allows me to mirror my iPhones to my Mac. And I can go to my second tab, and when I tap on the menu, I see it's not black. It looks great. And if I tap on the submenus, they work great too. The submenus creates a layer that drops down from that angle arrow and overlays the underlying menu view. And this is very similar to the behavior on iOS 18, but the drop-down arrow is on the leading edge with the system images on the trailing edge. You can also see that when I tap and hold, the menu item becomes darker, but the background still shows through. While still holding down my finger, I can slide over my choices. Now, since the menu looks like a button when it's on my view, I'd like to see if I can apply button styling to the menu. Well, I can try bordered, and that works. I get a semi-transparent gray background around the menu button. But bordered prominent is even more striking. But so far, at least in betas, if I try to apply the two new glass and glass prominent styles, they have no effect whatsoever. What I can do, however, is to set the button style to plain, and then add a glass effect to the menu button. Well, let me also add some padding. We did this in the previous video. So now you have that option if you want to have a glass button look on your menus. Now, one final thing is how menus look on toolbars. Now, I'll be covering toolbars in much more detail in the next video. But for now, let's just add a toolbar. And in that toolbar view builder, I'm just going to create a single toolbar item. And I'm going to set the placement to be the primary action location. And I'm just going to copy and paste in that same menu. You can see that the toolbar button is now showing the glass effect. But when you tap on it though, because just like in iOS 18, the menu doesn't have room to expand above, so it expands below. However, in iOS 26, it overlays the button and it expands, and the first item is at the top. The submenu turns black again here, but quickly returns to frosted glass. Again, this is not an issue on the device. What I wanted to do to finish this video though is to show you something that you can do using what was taught in the previous videos, and I may throw in one more thing. This people list view is displaying a list of people. And I have a state object called manager that is an instance of an observable data manager class. And in this class, you can see that I have an array of people that I start with. Plus, I have a function that will accept a string and use that to append it to the people array, ensuring that there are no duplicates. Now, I want to add a text field that's going to allow me to add more people to the list. And I want to use the match geometry transition effect that we learned in the last video to do this. So bear with me. I want to create this new functionality at the bottom of the view in the safe area inset. So let's start with that. We'll need a state property for the new text, so I'm going to create one and initialize it as an empty string. I also want to be able to control when it's in focus so that when I reveal it, the cursor will be in that text field and it will reveal the keyboard. So for this, I'll create a focus state variable called isFocused. Now the text field is only going to be revealed if we tap on an add button. So we'll need a Boolean state property that we can use to toggle for that. Initially, we want that to be false, but for design purposes right now, I'm going to make it true. So in the safe area inset, as we learned in the last video, I'm going to start with a glass container. And in here, I'm going to create an H stack. Now, if it's expanded is true, meaning we're initializing a new person, I'm going to create a text field where the title key is going to be enter name, and the text is going to be bound to our state text variable. Let's add some padding. And then I'm going to add a glass effect for the text field. And I'll set the focus state to be bound to that isFocused focus state property. Now, adjacent to the text field, I'm going to create an image that will serve as a button. We did lots of this in the last video. I will make the system name dependent on the state if it's expanded. If it is, we'll use a check mark. Otherwise, we'll use plus. Then I'm going to make the font a system size of 36. And I'll apply a frame where the width and height are both 80. And I'll give it a glass effect too. We did lots of these in the last video. Now, to this image, I want to apply an on-tap gesture. So for the action with animation, if the isExpanded is true, and at the same time, if the text is not empty, this means that we are displaying the text field and have entered a name. In that case, then we'll call the manager's addPerson function, supplying that text so that it gets appended to our array and updates our list. Otherwise, then we must have just tapped the button and revealed the text field. So we'll set isFocused to true. And then whether we're adding or not, we can clear the text field, and then we can toggle the isExpanded. So let's add some padding. Now I can go back now and set the isExpanded to false to leave just the image. I actually want that to be on the trailing edge though. So I'm going to add an alignment adjustment to our safe area inset and set it to the trailing edge. Now, rather than just abruptly being displayed, I want to use a transition effect here, as we learned in the last video, and this is going to require a namespace. So let's create a namespace. And we'll just call it namespace. So for the text field then, we'll need to create a glass effect ID, and we can specify the ID of text in that namespace. And then we can say that however this is revealed, we want to use a glass effect transition of match geometry with whatever triggered the reveal. Well, I want this image to look like a button though, when it's being tapped. So I can apply a regular case to the glass effect and then specify interactive, which is then going to expand the image as I tap it. And now I can give this a glass effect ID, where I can specify the ID as the string plus in that same namespace so that it'll match the transition. And then one more thing, when the text field expands and the image changes from plus to that check mark, I'd like to use a content transition using a symbol effect of replace. That is the magic case, but falls back to replace. Now, when the keyboard is displayed, I want to ensure that the return button is changed to a done button. And when I tap that done button, I want to be able to update the list and lose focus. So this is exactly the same action as the on tap gesture. Let me test this on a real device so that you can see the keyboard appearing. Let me add a new person called Billy. And you can see that the done button is now this check mark. And when I tap on it, it dismisses the keyboard and the list has been updated. Let me do just one more. And I'm going to add Albert to the list. This time, though, I'm going to tap actually on the checkmark image button, and it then reverts back to a plus, and the list gets updated here, and the text field is gone. Now, just one last thing. I notice that when I scroll up, the list starts to fade when it reaches the navigation bar at the top, but it's always in full strength at the bottom of the safe area. Well, you can change this safe area inset to a safe area bar. And when you do that, you'll notice that it starts to appear the same way as if we scroll to the top. When I scroll to the bottom, or if it's behind the safe area bar, the list has faded. So I hope you've learned something new here in this video that you can use going forward in your own videos. Thanks for watching. If you found this tutorial helpful, please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment. You can subscribe to my channel to get notifications of new videos. And remember that you can also download my YouTube channel listing app for free and quick access to all of my 350 plus YouTube videos. A link's in the description. And also remember, I have a full SwiftUI course available on my Teachable site where you learn how to build a fun multi-targeted app.